Hello everyone, welcome to the first round of feedback here at B Festival 2017. So I'm Miguel, for those who don't know me, and this is Manuel Bonillo. He's an artist who's been involved in the festival in several occasions, and we trust that he will be facilitating the feedback the best he can. The idea of the feedback is an opportunity for all of us to discuss about the work that has been presented at the festival. There are some people who cannot be here today, but it's been broadcasted online, so there will be some people listening now online while they're working or at home. If you have any questions or would like to make any comment, it is important, therefore, that you try to get the mic, because otherwise the people who are not here and are trying to listen won't be able to listen what you say. So please, if you want to make a comment, do take the mic. If there's any translation needed, just ask for it and we'll sort that out. And the idea is to go through the shows that we saw yesterday, but also through some of the visual artists who are presenting work every day. So today we will concentrate on the German company Mamasa, who finished the Red Line yesterday. And I think, and Elizabeth Hansen at the end of the session. I think that's all from my side, so I'll hand it over to Manolo and to everyone else.
Okay. Thank you, Miguel. So good afternoon, everyone. I'll be moderating or facilitating these sessions of Feedback Cafe during all the festivals, so I try my best, as Miguel said. And then today we are gonna change a little bit the order of the shows we are gonna comment because of practicality, people has to leave the country in a plane fast. So we will use these criteria to choose which show we talk about first. So in that case, we will talk first about aerobics, a ballet in 3 acts from Paula Rosolen and Happy Hyde from Germany. Yeah, then we will talk with Johanna from Amasa Collective, and afterwards we will go with the other 2 shows. The first show we saw yesterday in Domador, Kim is not here, he's already left, so I've already talked with him this morning, so I have his impressions. And yeah, that's the program. So Palmira will be after that, and then Elizabeth Hudson after that. So that's the real order. So let's begin, and then the first 4 we will like to ask Paula to give us an introduction of the history of the company, the show, and whatever you feel like important to share with the people here. So.
Well, so the show was developed, I mean, the idea is quite old. I mean, the idea is from 2012, but I only got to produce it in 2015. So 2012, I wrote the concept for the work, but in Germany, I tried to knock different doors and it didn't work. So it didn't happen until in 2014. Part of this group, I mean, Gabby's the only one from this, Gabby. Yeah. And we won in 2014 Danse Largie, which is a competition happening in Théâtre La Ville in Paris, together with Musée de la Danse. And this kind of allowed us to create a 10-minute format to to be able to knock at the doors, basically. So it only happened in 2015 to have full evening, 1-hour piece, which was premiered also in Paris and showed then in different theaters, basically. So so the curiosity came from the movements of aerobics and just yeah. So I spent for the larger version. I spent like about 1.5 months training with a aerobic competition team in Argentina. So like training together with them. So spending like it was really hard for me to get into the really everyday regular training, which was very different from a dancer's training, but also in some aspects I start watching the similarities, especially with ballet. So yeah, so learning about how this aerobic competition functions and the different choreography patterns, and yeah, so start comparing that with actually a ballet structure, romantic ballet structure, and like how ballets are structured in 3 acts, and so and compare different type of ballets. Yeah, so this is the 1-hour show. Yeah, and it's performed originally by 7 dancers. So yeah, that's a little bit of the introduction on that. And yeah, and then it's like the origin of aerobics as a method actually is from the 1969 as a method for the Air Force as pilots. So so this is also one thing that that came also into place when choreographing the work. And then yeah, okay, from the 80s, then what happened? Yeah, it's actually before that. So yeah, this is what I can tell right now. Yeah, maybe some.
Okay, thank you very much. I think it's like great introduction. So now I open the discussion to everyone here. So if there's someone who wants to give them their feedback, their ideas, their impressions, whatever about the show, like it's the moment. Go for it.
I just want to say, yeah, as people know what happened also, because yeah, we were prepared to show a 30-minute show with a version of 6, and yeah, and so in one day, which is with the people that was here, we just made it into a quintet, and yeah, that's things that happen, and one need to quickly adapt. So it was really hard for us, but we're happy to be able to present something out of that. Yeah.
Hello. I really enjoyed something I really enjoyed about the piece was how characters were coming through for each of the performers, not through them acting really, but through the choreography, the characters emergent from the choreography. And I was just wondering how much of that is intentional, because I know you've got at least one member who's very new to this, and how much is the choreography developed from intentional characters, or is it the choreography comes and then the characters trying to appear?
It is a really cast-based work.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really searching very hard to find him overall, and I'm happy that the result of having him was actually the character that it worked out. That it's not just. Of course, he did a great job in like 2 days, but he also accomplished the cast, and he was fitting very good the cast. So much that actually Johanna, you watched the performance before, so she even like at the beginning she even recognized him. So she saw the beginning that it was the same person. So actually, I'm happy that works also for the choreography in this sense.
Okay, so the characters are your intention.
Yeah, they're like very much an intention on that. So the green color that today was not here because the original isn't right now in Malaysia with another production that I'm doing, so he could not came here. So I prepared before another guy, which is like very similar to him also as an image, look, and way of moving, and almost a way of being also. But he could not, he could not came into the country, basically of political, whatever visa. Yeah.
Right, thank you.
Is there anyone wanting to say anything else? Because I can because I've been having an eye on the feedback postcards of yesterday of your shows, so I have some advantage over the others. So I pick up some of the questions that lots of people have been doing about any of the shows, and that was something I think that could be interesting for everyone. Was as you say, now you said that the show was originally for 7 people.
Yes.
So what was the character or the role of the missing 2 people that are not here?
Well, we've had 2 more colors. We have orange and we have green. Yeah. And basically, the colors are the first gay flag, because then it was 1 color taken out. But yeah, so this is one thing, and basically there are 2 main roles, which is the yellow and the pink, which are as would be in a ballet the female character and the soloist, male soloist is the prince. So it is intentionally that the focus is on them, and we are a little bit more into a corps de ballet in a way. So the other 2 are part of the core, that to be able to, some things is very much into cues, that we have a lot of cues which rhythmically counting based, and we just needed to do the piece. So how we arrange it is that some of us needed to take other part of the other roles in order to the piece to work. So it was a little bit bipolar for some of the people. So they need to interpret at the same time some part of different roles. So actually the one that runs at the end is actually the green, because he also runs at the beginning, but that part was cut out directly. But she kind of, so some small parts I needed to build it in order for the whole piece to work as a unit thing. Even if we show 30 minutes, try to make a unit, one thing is really hard. So yeah, so basically the other 2 are part of the core, but they have also some parts that we were not able to show. Some part were duets, or the one part that we are a trio with actually a quintet. So
Thank you. Is there someone? Yeah.
Yeah. One thing that she added is, of course, being 4 females and 1 male, it's just still even more another story that was not the idea, because actually we're 2 that were the main character, and now was pushed to be the main character. So that was not intentionally, but this is the reading that you're giving. Well, we didn't have another option. Yeah.
I don't have quite so much a question as sort of more a comment of something that I liked, and wondered if you could sort of just talk more about.
Sorry.
It's not so much a question, but more just a comment of something I liked that maybe you could talk more about, which is the very sort of powerful minimalist sort of lighting, and combined with no set and no music, and just using the sort of rhythm of the dance to set the scene and set the pace instead of any music. I wondered if you could talk about that a bit.
Yeah, well, initially it was really clear to me that I didn't want to work with music. But in the really first phase, when I was just trying out some movements at back in 2012, I thought oh wait, start working with minimal music. So, and then as soon as I start working with the fit rhythm and so on, I realized, well, this is mostly close to minimal music. So actually the idea of using music was dropped immediately, even by writing about the piece. So yeah, so this, but the way of composing was also a lot about phrase shifting, or adding, reducing, using a lot of minimal music way of composing. plus the formations, and yeah, so all the possibilities were used there. And why I decided not to use music is because I really wanted to be focused on the movement and not on the manipulation that music could do with the public. So my intention to that is that, yeah, just focus on movement, and maybe on the rhythm, but just be as puristic as possible with that. Yeah. It's okay. So I answered the
yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
like.
No, I think it's really powerful. Yeah.
Is there anyone?
Just a very simple question, but I guess why aerobics for you? Because it when I first started watching it, then I was thinking, oh, that's quite an 80s or 90s sort of aesthetic, and it's something that seems to have disappeared a little bit. So I wondered whether you were interested in this kind of, I don't know, this nostalgia for what aerobics means, and what and for a sport that almost has disappeared. But maybe I'm completely wrong. Maybe it's still very much around. But I just wondered.
It is very much around still. We have one person here still practice it. But no, actually, it's more. I'm basically interested in history and how things got together, and yeah, I depart also from the idea of what mostly people do not know about, that is actually military training for the pilots. I think most people didn't know about that, and so using that point of departure to clarify, or for me to say like, oh yeah, but then why it became like so attractive in the 80s? Okay, because the American society maybe was prepared to absorb all that, because the you had the whole militarism, you had the workaholism, you had you had to be effective, productive. You had all that really much present in that moment. So it was also a way to find things that today for me still are quite present. So yeah, and also because I was at that moment back in 2012, I was quite annoyed as an audience to see not movement-based piece on stage. So like we're like very still, very much like what is very little going on, and for me it was like an inner will to do a show where you try to, I mean, I wanted to do it with a larger team, so like, so then it's okay, it's a ballet, so, and then to include as much people as I can, as the production allows me to do, and then also to try to include other type of audiences that you normally don't have access in the dance world, because you are always like circulating around yourself, and your audience maybe is other dancers or other artists, and I did not want that. So I had to, approach different type of audiences by being accessible also. So choosing something that you could approach and be that everybody knows, because it's like an international, like everywhere is known. So taking that as a starting departure. But also because I was kind of very curious about this reading. You're really able to read the movement, which is like they are really codified. So I try to use those codes, but use it in another way. So yes, there are many layers that therefore I used that therefore I was interested in that. I don't know if explains a little bit the question.
I apologize, I didn't see the performance yesterday because I was stuck behind the bar, but I know you were in Basel last year, okay. And I was part of the disco, which was a follow-up event to the performance. So I'm picking up on your issue about the access, making it accessible to different audiences. So I'm wondering whether that kind of, for those of you who didn't understand that. There was, on a following night, I think, from the performance, there was a party, but there was an aerobics component of the disco, so which got everybody up.
We did an animation, basically. We went on stage, on the bar, and then like this, and then we give an aerobics class. So this is what happened.
So my question really is in the doing of the show, does that feel like an important part, or is that just like a little tack on in order to make the piece more accessible?
No. It's just something that Body Shamat came once with the idea of making. We hate him for that day because after doing like 1 hour show, and he came like, oh, could you like, you know, like he called it adrenaline. So we did that in when it was 10 minutes, when it was Musée de la Danse, and then we went to perform at the Théâtre de la Ville for the premiere. And then, but it was already in the program. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I didn't know there's going to be like 1 hour jumping. I'm so sorry. I'm like, okay. So it was super hard. And then the stage, that is a thing. And then some people that already knew about that really wanted that also. So but we included also on the price as a thing to do. But no, it is more that because what happened, I don't know if here was the case, but sometimes when people finish to watch the show, they feel like moving. So it was a way kind of like to give that and people to try out something out. But it's not the question there is not the need for making it even more accessible. Yep. I think it's just, it's not to be, you know, democratic. It's not about that. It's just, for me, it was a personal need that I approach it that way. But it's also because what I said before is like really non-moving work that was being presented, and I wanted to still making a work that is conceptual, but still that has a visual impact. So.
Okay.
I think Gabriela has just volunteered to do an aerobic class on Friday or Saturday. Thank you very much.
Well, no, I think he can tomorrow, tonight.
Okay, thank you very much, Paula, and all the company for your participation. Now let's move to.
I'm just saying thank you very much for everyone. It's not to be unpolite, but I need to take my flight, so I'm gonna go slowly. Thank you.
Okay, so let's move on to the Mamasa Collective. First of all, we are gonna play a video of the project, so with the documentation. So let's go. We see the video. Yeah.
We are actually not creating a border, but we are trying to connect
together,
you know,
to remove the border.
Yeah,
yes,
exactly. And how we do this connection, we put the line, we hit a building, we have to knock on the door, say hello, we are doing this line, can you help us?
What do you want now? What do you want to do now? Nothing. We would like to enter your garden and stretch the red line to a little corner of your garden.
ASINGELINE is a large-scale outdoor art project that seeks to join 2 points of the city together with one long straight line. This 1 mile long line of red tape connects the city center, one of the richest areas of the city, with one of its most deprived areas. This work of art promotes a subtle but important reflection about our society and the inequality we live in. So the line is set, and then it means that we have to go through apartments, shops, on the road, under the car, under the bed, in the toilet, wherever the line takes us, we have to go.
And that square is the auditorium, and then that is the stage area.
Right.
Because that's the grid up to the fly floor.
and we started the line in Ladywood, and now we're traveling with this straight line across the city until we're going to reach the Rep Theatre. That's where the festival is happening. And the idea of this project is that the line is always straight and it reaches a wall, yeah, which is a barrier, and then we find the other side of the wall and we continue the trajectory of the line. So this is the objective, we must do it.
Ladywood, that's quite a long way, isn't it?
Yeah, and we've done.
You guys doing it. That's great.
Yeah, I mean,
how many rolls have you been through?
Quite a lot. I would say like at least already 10 rolls.
Yeah.
Each is 50, like a half a meter. So we've done quite a lot already.
So you're measuring it to make sure it's accurate as well, because it looks quite straight.
We give our best. Give our best.
So this will go all the way across there and through the ICC.
Okay. Yeah. How are you going to get across the water?
What water?
Well, the canal down below.
Oh no. Oh yeah. No, there is. No, we know about that. Don't worry. The idea is that this will go on all surfaces, but we've got a double-sided version that will stretch across the water.
Yeah. Try to put it down.
Straight.
So they're connecting Ladywood to the Birmingham Rep, and tomorrow at the start of the launch of Bee Festival, which is this festival here, the line will land on stage at the Birmingham Rep.
Oh, right. Members of a collective from Germany called Mamasa, and they're here finishing their project ASINGELINE in Birmingham.
Yeah, so this is our, I don't know how many times we did it already all over the world, but initially it was only created for Antwerp. Mamasa usually is a choreographer's collective, and they had a residency at the venue there, the Single, I don't know if you have heard about it. And they had long discussions with the curator there, how to get people into the theater, because the Single is a little bit outside of the city center. And they thought about like, what can we do to attract more people to the Single? And they said, well, there's the city, there's the Single, 2 geographical points, so let's make a connection, but literally, let's connect these 2 points now with the red line, and this is how they did it. And they never thought about like going on tour with this idea. It was really like an enacted thought. They had this thought, how to do it, and then they did it. So as it's the subtitle is an enacted thought, a single line, an enacted thought. And on this way, of course, you like, because the idea is, no, the task is to go directly. You as a person, you'd never go directly because the line would like hit a wall, then you have to go around, look for the other side of the wall, look for the other side of the wall because it's not so easy to find the other side of the wall, and then continue the line in the same angle, into the same direction. So you do like that, while the line goes like that. And on this way, there are a lot of people who would not let go through. And this is also the task of the line, to insist and to persuade people that it's so important that you let you in their shops, in their apartments, into their toilets, under their trucks. Oh, you've seen what we usually do. So, and this was created for Antwerp, and then I don't remember who thought that this was such a great idea that they could also do it in, I think the first, I don't remember, Africa. They went to Africa 6 times to do it there, to Israel, Frankfurt, of course, Switzerland, and then the Bee Festival invited us to do it. And we are now like 5 people who can do it, so we come in different, with different groups. And here we had a very nice team of helpers, like Graham. I don't know, how was it for you when you first heard about the idea how to do it?
Well, I tried not to think about it until the start of the project, I suppose. But my job was what was a title, I think, door opener. Yeah. Is that right? A door opener. So I envisaged my job as being a facilitator, someone who could communicate, who had a local knowledge, and therefore could make some decisions or be able to navigate through the city. And in some ways, I think it is perhaps easier being an outsider rather than an insider. And maybe that's part of my personality and part of the kind of English personality, that we are a little bit too polite to and accepting of the first no. Whereas when you're an outsider artist, as Mamasa are, and they come from Germany, then they can be more insistent and not accept the first no and not accept the second no.
Poor him. Poor him. Because the doors were already closed and he had accepted the no, but we did not. We said, go there again, ring again, we will help you. So there were this Irish couple we saw, I think we went there 3 times. And well, there were, of course, people sometimes are very afraid because we are strangers, like knocking at the door. Also, we say we are from the Bee Festival and we are a group of choreographers. What is a choreographer? Of course, people don't know what a choreographer is. And then it's like this shy couple, they were so nice and she couldn't hear well. So she pretended to understand and said no, but actually she hadn't understood at all. But when she finally understood, they were so friendly, they opened the doors, we were in the garden doing the line, the man was with us, and she in the meantime explained to the other part of the team the history of her family, showed pictures of her son, of herself when she was young. She was so pretty when she was young. So this happens all the time when doing the line, and the line is not only the connection between those 2 points like city and art, it's also all the connections that happen while doing the line, the connection you have with the people, all the talks, and all people tell you, it's very touching. You invest a lot of energy. It's really physical work for me, yeah. But you get back a lot of energy and nice stories. Anything else? Yeah, and we have this tape which we can glue on the floor, but we also have tape which is more polite because we can remove it. So there are official buildings who would not allow us to glue the tape on the floor. So we just put it there, take the pictures to document that we did it, and then we can remove it. Or we leave it without telling them.
I mean, it's interesting, this morning I walked back along the trail, and some survives, and some has gone completely, and some is scrunched up. There is like little traces of the tape. So like bits hanging out of a bin, a dustbin, or bits that are waving in the breeze, or and the kind of memory of the show still exists, and that's another fascinating dimension of the show, I think, is how long the mythology of this piece will last in those people's minds. How do that old couple explain to their son when he finally arrives that they open the door and they let 6 complete strangers into their house, bearing in mind that she's 87, and they did what in your back garden? It's very, very challenging. The challenges in a corporate space are entirely different, and that's a whole other story, going through Brindley Place and having to deal with big managed buildings, structures. It's enormously challenging, and but I don't know to what extent it translates across different languages, but red tape, in English, red tape is about bureaucracy. It is that symbol for bureaucracy. So what we are attempting to do, I think, with this project is cut through the red tape with the red tape. So it's an interesting paradox.
Like they also have done it in Israel twice, and this was very interesting because in Israel borders are a big issue. So people really were afraid of this red tape. It was like a border for them. Are we allowed to cross? Of course, it's just a step. But like borders are such a strong issue that it was a totally different thing than to do it in Venice, for example. Venice was a different task with all these canals. But luckily we did Venice, so we knew how to treat these canals here. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the British, no, the English Venice, yes. Questions?
Miguel says me that there are more channels here than in Venice, like yesterday.
Are you sure?
How important or not is having a permanent record of what you did to you as a company? So for instance, in 20 years' time, when younger people are saying, do you remember when that big red line came to Birmingham, and somebody thinks it's a myth, their ability to research and find out about it or not, is that an important part of what you do?
Yeah, we document everything.
And where does it exist? Or
Well, the material is all with us, and we have a video, which with each line we do will be edited again, so the new line goes into the video again.
Right.
So, and then we have really slideshows of all the lines we did.
Okay, great, thanks.
Sorry, just to follow that up, I just wondered, why is that important? Why is it important to have that document? As in, would it, have you thought that if it's not documented and it's just in the moment and it's the people that you meet at that time and it's those memories that those people carry, and that's it?
Very good question, but maybe it's only for us because it's so ephemerical. Do you say this? Is this the right English word? Yeah, because like here people just rip it off, and we don't have any memory of the thing, so maybe it's mainly for us.
Yeah, sorry, my question was basically exactly the same, which was, could that documentation or some version of it exist as an autonomous artwork?
Yes, like when they did it in Petah Tikva, a town in Israel, the Museum of Modern Art wanted to have an installation. So this is when we first took all the documentary material and made this video and this slideshow. And there it was really presented as an art piece. So people would sit there with headcuffs and listen and just concentrate on the documentation. But it's not only documentation, it's like an artsy documentation.
And how do you feel about that as the artist? How does that relate to your work?
It's fine. I mean, because they do all kind of things. They do dance pieces, other social installations. We have other things, not only this red single line, all kind of things. Some do writing, some do this, some do that.
Why was red the specific color you used? How come you didn't use other colors, so like red, like blue, for example? Why did you use red specific?
Why red? Why red?
I have to ask them. I don't know. I think it's the most the color you notice first.
Okay.
Is red tape an English phrase? Does it translate into other languages? No.
We have a red thread. In German, we have the red thread.
Is that similar meaning?
It is. The red line. The red line. You say red line.
Hello. I'm quite interested in the technical kind of, if you look at the technical skill of what you're doing, whereas you say a dancer might train as a dancer or an acrobat might train acrobatics, essentially the skill you're training is getting people to say yes. Do you feel like you're every time, do you feel like you get better at persuading people? Is this something you're training at?
Yes, you learn a lot how to insist and how to persuade people, right? But we don't have this normal training like all the politicians have, how to talk you into that, but we get better each time.
It was interesting that a mantra of Ilan's was I thought he was very insistent and he wouldn't accept no. Even, after I'd been knocking on the door twice, he would give me a look as if to say, we need to try again. But even in the moments when he was, you could sense that he was perhaps capitulating, he would say, what would Fabrice do? I'm doing this now, what would Fabrice do? And he knew that Fabrice would go further.
Exactly. Fabrice was the one who kind of invented the whole thing.
I would be interested why you work with the door opener.
Because we are not so acquainted to the different cultures, so we always have a door opener who is from the very city we do that. So in Venice we had an Italian girl, in Frankfurt I did it, because people know how to speak the language of the people, which we don't.
And did you ever had the situation that you didn't have a door opener and that you have to try it on your own?
No, but actually if the door opener does not succeed, all the others help him and try. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Well, what happens if you don't succeed? Did it happen?
Yeah, it happens.
So what, do you climb over the roof or?
Yes, for example, yeah, that's what we really do sometimes. When a shop like a grocery store, the manager of the grocery store says, well, he's too much afraid to let us in. He says, well, I have to ask my boss. And the next boss says, well, I have to ask my next boss. So in the end, we wouldn't get any permission to enter, so we just like, yeah, go on the roof and do it there on a Sunday when the shop is closed. Yes. And also here we had a fenced area, we couldn't enter. Nobody could find out whose territory it was, so not me. But him and Ilan just went over the fence and crossed the whole thing. And well, yeah, Fabrice does a lot of other very illegal things to get into spaces. Thank God he's a dancer, so he really can climb high walls.
Okay, so if there's no one wanting to say anything more, we can move on to the next show. It's a quarter to... yeah, we want to remind you all, if you haven't seen the documentation of the Mamasa's work, that's there in the corridor towards the restaurant, so anyone can have a look after that. That's still there.
And I have the same point to say as Paola. My flight also leaves soon, so yeah. I'm sorry, I have to leave. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Anna. Okay, so now let's move on to the first show we saw yesterday. That's Indomador from Animal Religion Company from Catalonia. So, I will make the role of Kim, yesterday's performer. I've been talking to him this afternoon just to ask him some like the presentation any one of you can do because you're here, and I will make for him. And after that, I ask him some of the questions that I saw a lot on the feedback postcards, but still I will let you like explain or give your doubts and commentaries. He will see that because that's gonna be film and stuff, so speak as if he were here. And I may have even some of his answers to some of the questions. If you make the questions we thought together, some of you would make. So, I mean, he explained to me that this is the first show of the company. It's the company is already 4 years working, and he's coming from a circus background and like using dance as a secondary language, like he thought on his, he found on his way through circus. And he was explaining to me that for him the most important thing was like to find the strangeness of like things we cross through every day, and in that aim of finding the strangeness, he was wanting to use the humor as part of the show. And also the idea of limits and the risk, which he says it's also inherent to the circus language. And for this concrete show, he told to me that he was like wanting to work with the ideas of gender and animality. So, and that's with the thing with the animals is something they do a lot with in the company, and that's like the main presentation of his show. So we opened the discussion as we've done with the other things, and I let the microphone to anyone who wants to say anything about the show. Thank you.
So when he performed yesterday for his first time, why does this mask represent him? Why did he not use other masks as well? He used those three specifically. Why did he not use other animals elsewhere?
He told me it's fine because I have the answer. It's quite a sinister situation. This is like, I feel like acting a lot. But anyway, he told me that it's not because I was asking him, like there was a lot of people saying like they enjoy a lot the chicken, the cow, and the horse, like the ones people enjoy most. If I read in the feedback cafe, it's like some kind of mix of everyone's opinion. And he told me that the masks were only the mask. His sister gave him as a present.
Okay.
The first one, the chicken and the cow, and then he began to work with them.
Okay.
Like not really beginning with the idea that I want a chicken and I want a cow and I want the masks just appear in his life, and then he tried to find what's inside of him with that mask, something like that. I hope I didn't find Kim when you're watching. Anyone else?
It was more just an observation, which I guess has this been recorded? So he's going to hear this. You'll hear this. It really reminded me in parts. I don't know if it was coincidental or intentional, but his stage presence, performance, persona reminded me of Iggy Pop, and Iggy Pop's kind of. Not just the aesthetic, but the androgyny and the animalistic. So it was just an observation that it really reminded me of Iggy Pop in his prime.
Anyone else?
Thanks. I'm wondering if he mentioned anything to you about the contrast of using mask performance alongside unmasked performance, because often when we see mask work, it is a mask show and the masks are on and you never see the performer, and it is, of course, some kind of statement when you have this very stylized mask performance and also very stylized but in a different way human performance, like a human persona against like the grotesque animal personas. I was wondering if he, especially with the kind of thematic references to religion throughout it, and of course like masks, you have masks and like rituals and stuff like this, and I was just wondering if you mentioned anything to do with this.
Not really. I have some of the answers, but not all of them. I mean, just maybe we're talking about because I read in his synopsis he's making contemporary circus, and then I asked him like, is this important for you, the gender, like why you say this is contemporary circus, because it could be physical theater or like whatever. And in that sense he told me that he really wants to defend the circus category and find a new place for that. And he said like the rest, because he says, yeah, I'm doing some puppetry at the beginning, so someone could say this is like puppetry theater, as you're saying now with masked theater, but I don't think, I mean, he told me he's interested in like reevaluating the place for circus, but not for the discipline. So I don't think he was like, like so important for him to keep the rules of masked theater or some of these other categories. I think he's like trying to break the category of circus. That's what he said me like contemporary means for him, like trying to take circus beyond the. So but I don't really have that's something that has to do with your answer, but it's not the.
Well, if he's listening, which hopefully he will be in the future, I think this is really nice. Taking elements from these other practices like mask work, puppetry, but not buying into all of the rules of that genre. Borrowing and mixing up is really nice.
Yeah, I also think so. Yeah. Anyone else? No? Yeah, we move on the next one because we have lots of, yeah. No, but it's fine, it's fine. I don't need to give all the answers, that's better even if they're not given. So then let's move to Palmira. Yeah, could you pass the microphone to him and could you please introduce yourself? And
just apologies on behalf of Nassi. We had a big fight this morning and he took the car, his little Peugeot, and drove off to back to London. But I will be doing the conversation on his behalf. All the bad ideas are his, so you can go for it. I don't mind. All the good ideas are mine.
Super. Is there anyone wanting to add something to or ask something? Any commentaries, whatever?
Thanks. I've got an intention of seeing all the shows without reading anything about them. So I'd not read anything about your show. I think I mentioned to you earlier. So I didn't know the context or the backstory to it. And so I had a different reading. So I kind of take things at face value and then deconstruct that. But is it important for you to know the context of how that show came about and how explicit do you feel that you need to have that backstory in there?
I think it's the show is not entirely finished, to be honest. So this is very much an ongoing question that we have as makers. For us, it's very much the starting point was the images of people destroying monuments and statues in museums. So I don't know if you saw these images of ISIS filming themselves destroying statues in Mosul, and then after that a lot of temples being blown up, which obviously really shocked a lot of people in the West, including ourselves. And then we started questioning why we were shocked about these things. And then we started questioning as well the response and what people said about these people as well that were destroying these monuments and these statues. And a lot of the terms being used for these destructions were the term barbarian. And so that was the kind of real starting point for us. What that meant to be considered barbarian, and who was barbarian, and whether the ones who considered themselves to be civilized are not barbarians in a different way. So that's the kind of like, that's the little history behind the show. And so we called it Palmyra, thinking that's going to be a real clue to what the show is about. But actually it turns out that a lot of people don't know about Palmyra at all, don't know that it's a city in Syria that got destroyed by ISIS. So when we started showing little extracts of the piece, for a lot of people it was almost irrelevant whether it was about what the title meant. It just became something else. And so for a lot of the time we then started going like, okay, so how are we going to introduce the fact that it's about Palmyra? Do we need to show images of this site, and do we need to show slides at the end that explain a little bit about this story? And then we thought, well, so up until yesterday actually we still had more references of the fact that it's a city in Syria that got destroyed. And then we said, okay, we have 30 minutes. Let's see whether the show can stand on its own without too much explanation. And let's see whether people, the work that we've done, which is a lot of, it doesn't look like it probably, but a lot of research has gone into it. Let's see whether it still communicates on its own and with just two people on stage smashing plates. And so we tested it out yesterday, really, this structure that we had for a 30 minutes piece. And what was really interesting for us is to say that a lot of people read a lot of things into it. It's a very open form, and I think that's our ambition actually, is to make it a springboard for something that is a little bit more universal, because it's not just Palmyra. What we're talking about is such a huge subject. Even us trying to connect all the dots and all the meanings of these conflicts going on in this part of the world is very complicated. So to try and sum it all up in a few slides at the end explaining this is what the show is about is impossible. It's impossible. So then we were like, okay, maybe it's more about what is it going to communicate on its own.
Hi. I like very much your piece. At the beginning I thought it was a bit, they could have gone farther, but then when I knew it was a work in progress, so excellent. My first question I wanted to ask you, why Palmyra, not Benidorm, but you have asked. And some question I was thinking is, the music, the classical music is related to what happened when the Russians retook Palmyra and held this concert to wash the public execution of ISIS. Is related?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So this idea of using classical music in Palmyra, when the Russians took back the city of Palmyra, they staged this huge concert on the ancient theater stage, and that image obviously just stood out for us, because it was very much this claim of, we have civilization and we're going to show you what civilization is, and it turned out to be this classical concert. So then we said we have to use classical music, because of course this is this kind of epitome of what, to some people, and including us, including ourselves, what this kind of idea of high art or high civilization would mean. So then we said, let's try and use it. So then we started using the music that they used in the concert, which was Prokofiev. But it became too much of a comment on Palmyra and on the Russian kind of invasion of the city.
Too much literal.
Exactly. So then we started saying, oh, should we have images of that concert in the show? Should we have? And then we just decided to again move away from that and see, actually, this piece of classical music is so beautiful. It's so beautiful that then we were like, but what is it that then could become a little bit unnerving if it gets repeated again at the end? And it's about us appreciating that music and him not being able to quite be able to access it. And what's uncomfortable about that?
Second, is there any? I read some kind of reflection about the hypocrisy in the simplicity of the explanations of the conflicts, when mostly on Western TVs they say these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. So I read some kind of game or joke about it, no?
Absolutely.
Between you both.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad that you read all of these things into.
I think, yes.
So yeah, then it became, well, it's this divide, isn't it, between barbarian, civilized. And so often when we were watching these images of the destructions in the Middle East or in Palmyra, it was very much this idea of, we're on the good side trying to protect these monuments, and they're on the wrong side, destroying these monuments. And then we started questioning again this kind of dichotomy, and feeling that from our Western point of view, we somehow feel very much on the right side of the fence. But actually when you look at the numbers of the people being killed in those conflicts, actually recently the statistics showed that, for example, the international coalition was killing more people, more civilians than ISIS and the Russian army united. So then you start questioning these things as well, and then you start thinking, well, we're not necessarily being told. We're not necessarily being told.
The city of Raqqa.
Exactly. And again, it's this thing of actually who's most barbarian? Is it the people who commit these horrible acts, or is it the people who are dropping bombs with drones and killing people? Who's most barbarian in this?
Last, I'd like to recommend you a book of Alessandro Barico about this. I don't know if the name is Barbarians or the Invasion of Barbars or something like that. It's about, in the title, about mutations. If you remember Alessandro Barico.
I know another book, one of his book, but I don't know.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Thank you.
Something that's been like occurring to me quite a lot as we've been talking about this, and also when I watched the piece, is the phrase senseless violence, which is something, or senseless destruction, which is something that's said a lot, which is kind of implies that stuff has been done for no reason. So like the things have been broken and you don't know why they've done it. And I felt like when I watched the piece, I also, like Rob, didn't read anything before it, so I was just sort of experiencing it. And I felt like there was a lot of feeling of casual violence and casual destruction in it without any sort of real reason that you could discern for it. And I was wondering if through doing the piece, you felt like you were able to get to the viewpoint, you got towards the viewpoint where you maybe understood in some way or felt some kind of understanding for where the sense in the violence came from. Is that an okay question?
Yeah, no, it is. So you mean the senseless violence potentially being those destructions?
With like, if it's casual violence, it's actually not entirely casual. There are feelings behind it, like the mindset that causes you to want to destroy things almost without caring what they are, to just destroy everything. The mindset that gets you to that point.
Well, I think it's for I think it's mainly, so we were quite uncomfortable to begin with trying to portray the other side, so the barbarian. So that was the responsibility given to Nassi, is to try and be that person or represent that person. And I think we started kind of looking into causes and reasons as to why people would have done these things, as to why people would have destroyed these monuments. And we started looking as well as at a lot of people who may have gone to Syria to fight, for example, like a lot of jihad people, and the reasons why they would have done it. And we connected it with actually a lot of other paths of political dissidents who wanted to create chaos as a means to achieve something. So when you think about, for example, we went on a tangent and kind of started looking at, for example, the Japanese bomb fighters who would take on planes and then just crash into planes. And at the time, it was just seen as a real kind of shocking act that no one had seen before, is people being ready to kill themselves in an attack. And then we looked at the different routes of people doing these things and why, and yes, of course, at some point you start understanding why people might want to do it. It still is very hard for us to access. So we're treading on very kind of tricky grounds, because also we don't want to make an apology for what these people are doing, in the same way that we are not trying to create an apology for what our governments might be doing. So it's really kind of like weighing out both sides, because of course the fight ongoing there is not for no reason. There are reasons for why these things are happening, And we're not trying to simplify it by saying they're fighting for no reason. No, they have reasons for fighting. But we're not trying to impose any judgment. And I think that's the thing that maybe the media tried to make us do too much, is to have a real clear judgment on these are the wrong people, these are the good people, and that's it. But what we're trying to do is something that makes us a little bit kind of question that and makes us feel a little bit more unsettled as to what these judgments come from.
I had a quick question. So if last night was the first time you kind of tested it out, I wondered what we as an audience maybe gave you or surprised you, or...
It was... Well, I told you a little bit about this earlier. We were very surprised by the laughs. We knew that there was a kind of comedic potential, but for us to go on a stage and to experience this level of laughter was very unnerving, especially because when we know about so much of the content of the piece, for us to kind of see that it still makes people laugh so much, which I think is wonderful and also terrifying at the same time, is just to go, wow, we're talking about something that makes us cry so much, but then suddenly on a stage like this can make us laugh as much. That seemed, and because it's the first few times that we're presenting this work, it's something that we're going to have to kind of gauge as well, as to how much we're wanting to also, if we carry on this trend of this piece, then at what point does it become not funny anymore? And at what point does it make us kind of look back on ourselves and make us consider our judgment?
But I suppose, can I just quickly say, I think almost because it was so funny at the beginning, it definitely gave us a further place to fall, which makes it a very effective piece of theatre, in my humble opinion.
But at what point did it go back for you?
I think I started to go, it's not so funny anymore, is when Yassi started to pretend hit you with the hammer. Then it began to turn, it was still kind of funny. There was still moments of funny, and I still found a lot of humor in it, but maybe that's again because of my background. But yeah, that's when it started to go, it's not so funny.
Thank you. So this is very related to that. I think it's great that you're making comedy work out of very serious issues. I think this is really important and valuable. And there were, maybe not intentionally from what you just said about not expecting so many laughs, there were a couple of really, really powerful moments where the destruction or violence or like the conflict, which has been comedic up until this point, when there's a turning point and it stops being funny. And this is really, really, really powerful. The first one being, for me, Nassi with the hammer. And he's swinging it and everyone laughs, he's swinging the hammer, and then it just goes on a few seconds and then the laughter stops. And that the atmosphere you create there, and then again when you're talking about Paris and he's taking the piss behind you, and then you turn around and go up to him, it's like, oh, he's gonna get him. Then you start hitting him, and then the laughter just, and this atmosphere is really, really, really tense, and you really get like a visceral feeling from the audience, from like, we were laughing at that, and now we're not laughing at it anymore. And I was just wondering, is this something you were doing on purpose, and is this something that you can even try to create without an audience there? A hard thing to devise, I imagine.
Yeah, so a lot of the answers come from presenting the work in front of people, because it's a kind of triangle between Nassi, myself, and the audience, always. So it's this kind of thing that we have all the time, and that we keep thinking about, but that we can't really practice without an audience. So I think, yeah, it's testing like but yeah, I think a lot of the answers are from trying it out in front of an audience and seeing the right timing as well. And I think that's you know, Nassi is a bastard, but the good thing he does all the time is the timing. He's very kind of sharp on how long he's going to kind of keep doing something. And that's something he's very good at, is always watch out for the right timing, which I think is rare in a way, because we, especially in this day of age, or in this culture at the moment, I find that we're having to always, we can't let time kind of do something. We're having to be like effective, and I find that this kind of allowing time to make things happen on stages is very important, to let things kind of start become a little bit uncomfortable, a little bit uneasy, not so pleasant to watch, is what's live and exciting about theatre, I think. So, yeah.
Well, yeah, I think this is something, like letting that feeling develop, I think is something that's really valuable, especially with what you were saying before, trying to look back and be like, look at your own point of view, and you know, what are we trying to do here? Are we taking an angle? And I think an angle that you are taking and really succeeding in is you will make people question things by creating, like, from these tiny little situations where people go from ha funny to oh shit, like this feeling in people is really worth instilling, and it is very, very relatable to your kind of macro overall idea as well. There's a direct link there, which is great, I think.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else wanting to say something? No? Okay, let's then move to the last artist we're gonna talk with today, and that's Elisabeth Ratzander.
Hello. So I'm one of the visual artists that's been creating an installation at Bee Festival. I think my piece kind of follows on quite nicely from the stuff that Mamatsa was talking about, cutting through red tape with red tape, which is a nice, I think you said that, Graham. Yeah, that's a nice sort of phrase that yeah, is kind of something that I was thinking about a lot with the project that I've been doing. So if anyone's seen any banana-related things around the space over the last few days, then that's probably my fault. What I was trying to do is explore the things in public space that encourage us to move or behave in certain ways. And I was thinking about people's resistance to that as well, how as kind of a human with your own agency, it can be quite frustrating to come across things that are trying to manipulate you, sometimes for your own good, sometimes for the good of the organisation that's put it, sometimes for reasons that can't really be understood. But I felt that a kind of reaction against these methods of control was part of the rhetoric that led to the result of the EU referendum. I don't know how many people remember in the run-up to the EU referendum the stories in the tabloids about the EU controlling the shape and size of our bananas that we sell in the UK. Not actually true. That's mainly to do with supermarkets and trade agreements. But I thought that this sort of sense of outrage that it provoked, that there were these nameless, faceless people who are controlling such a trivial aspect of our everyday lives, and wanting to fight back against that and to take back control, is actually a really relevant feeling, and a feeling that that is really interesting and looking at, but just that the banana is a straw man, if you will. It's like the banana is not the thing that is, and the EU is a straw man, and the banana is kind of like an irrelevancy. It's not actually, the EU is not controlling these parts of our lives. There are many bodies that are doing exactly the same thing, and I was thinking about these, again, like I said, the things in public space that control where you go, whether they are railings, bollards, tactile paving, signs that tell you what to do, many of these things. So what I wanted to do was create banana-related objects that controlled people's flow through the theatre space. Some of them, like the paths, suggesting a route that you might want to go, but at points this might be a route that not everyone is allowed access to. So some of the sort of banana paths lead to theatre spaces, but other ones lead to things like the green room, or to areas where only staff or performers have access. So for some members of the audience, they could be led a certain way, only to then be confronted with the fact that they're not able to progress any further. And the metal bananas are sort of markers as well. They are placed at points where there is a boundary that is being or about to be crossed between an area that is fully publicly accessible and somewhere that's not, whether that's from between audience and performers, between front stage and backstage, between public and private, so including sort of moving from the outside into the inside of the building. And I wanted to use the bananas are made out of iron, and one of them out of brass, which are materials that are used in the public realm. They're very hard and menacing and permanent, and I think it's very interesting that in public space, citizens aren't really allowed to make their own marks that are permanent. If you sort of look at things like graffiti is termed as vandalism, it's something that you're not allowed to do. Things that are more encouraged as a sort of subversive way that you can fight back are things like using chalk paint or yarn bombing, where you're sort of knitting graffiti. All of these things are using things that are very impermanent, that can't come off again. Even interestingly, and I don't have a problem with this, but my interventions in the space have to be impermanent. And at various points through installing my works that are about being told what to do and what you can and can't do, and red tape to some extent, there were lots of points where health and safety protocol of the theatre and sort of wider national health and safety protocol meant that I couldn't put things in places that I wanted to, which I think is quite an interesting thing for me to experience, because in a way, when I started the project, it was about me controlling where people go, but in fact, the things that I put were also controlled by someone else, which is the very thing that I was trying to critique. Anyway, I've probably talked enough, but if anyone has any questions or comments.
Hello. I don't know if this is a question, this is a comment, I guess, and I'd like to know if you have anything to say about it. I have noticed in the last 2 years there have been a huge amount of bananas in contemporary shows that I've been to see, specifically contemporary circus. Last year specifically, I saw a huge amount of shows that featured bananas. And it became a bit of a running joke between me and my friends. Could go and see a show, and it'd be like, "Oh, this has a banana." All the shows seem to feature a banana in some sense, and I think it's, you know, they obviously have a lot of connotations in our culture, like comedy value, and this kind of thing, almost like an absurd icon. I guess the question is that something that you're trying to harness? The idea of a banana as a ridiculous or funny thing, is this intentional to like poke fun, or is this just a coincidence?
Yeah, the ridiculousness of the banana, I think, is very important. I think that's partly why it was picked on by the tabloids to begin with in the first place, is that its ridiculousness made it a thing to say, well, this is so ridiculous, how are we letting this happen? And so they like the ridiculousness. I also like the ridiculousness, but kind of from the other side of the argument. And I think bananas have lots of sillinesses about them, and the shape, like lots of people say, oh, it's like they're very phallic, and yes, they are. So actually are the things that they're also being like, if you think about it, the sort of railings and bollards and things actually all are as well, but you're just not used to seeing them as ridiculous or silly objects. You're just used to seeing them and not even seeing them. Also the sort of physical comedy aspect of a banana is something that slips you over, trips you up, and that's kind of partly what, with the health and safety stuff, they're trying to prevent, is you slipping up. Yeah. But also some of the objects that I've combined them with are things that actually do the opposite, like some of the floor-based ones are based on a medieval weapon, or actually older than medieval, I think, called a caltrop, which is a sort of a bit like a throwing star, but it's a twisted sort of piece of metal with different sort of arms that come out that you would leave on the floor for people to tread on, fall over, break their ankles, break their feet, to prevent advancing armies from being able to get any further. So yeah, there's all of that. As for the sort of zeitgeistiness of it, I'm not so familiar with the performing world, especially not circus, so I haven't seen circus shows with it in or not. But within the art world, I mean, bananas are definitely something that crop up as well from time to time. I think I wasn't sort of after this is particularly something that is being used in the arts one way or the other, but I think probably one of the reasons why it's used, apart from its silliness, its sort of phallic imagery, it's colour as well, but so it's very eye-catching. I think it also it's also very everyday. It's totally recognisable. The second you see it, you know what it is, and I think that also is, and it's not that much like that many other things. And I think that for any sort of artist is gonna, it's sort of like a platonic object in a way. And so I think that is definitely part of why I like it as an object, and probably has something to do with its popularity in wider things as well.
Cool. It's people care about bananas. It's kind of become like an element, like a pure element of art in this country, or comedy or something.
Is there someone else?
Thanks. Yeah, I was just thinking about, we were talking about bananas at lunchtime, funnily enough. And I always squash them in my bag. You know, I'm sure you squash them in your bag. But I was thinking about sort of scale and how you think about scale, because you've got several pieces that are quite tiny and quite subtle and hidden away, and I wouldn't know unless you'd have told me. And then some that are more obvious, and obviously the yellow really kind of sticks out, and especially when you start noticing health and safety, yellow. What, you know, in terms of scale, how small and how big would you go, and where, and you know, how public is space, and I don't know, some of those things.
Okay. When I first started working with bananas, in fact, the one in the dining area that people might have seen, which has a sort of spotlight on it and its head chopped off, that's how I see it, sort of the result of the revolution against the banana bureaucracy, that was one of the first batch that I made. So I sort of made them in two goes, one lot out of brass, and so they're all yellow, and one lot out of iron, which are all the black ones. And the brass ones I made oversized, so they were sort of exaggerated, but they were only oversized slightly. So from a distance, I don't know how obvious or not it is that it's larger than a normal banana. It's probably 2 to 3 times the size. But that's still actually quite small as far as sculptures go, and public sculptures. And then I made the decision with the iron ones to just make them entirely realistic size, partly because it actually just fitted in with scale of everything, I suppose, because the things in public space that I was looking at are all built around a human scale, and so when you look at the finials on top of railings, they are a very similar size actually to a real banana, and I kind of wanted the objects that I made at a glance to be almost not noticeable, but sort of almost to blend in with the real object, and then to sort of there to be a slight double take when you realise that actually, for example, the one outside the green room, it looks like it's a fleur-de-lis finial, but then you realise it's actually a half-peeled banana. And I think if that was overscaled, it would do a different thing. It would be, it would no longer be as much like the object in the real world, and would be sort of more about exaggerating what's going on, which is not something I'm against. I hadn't thought about making the sort of larger objects like the sort of the things that are a bit more like a railing or like a bollard or something like that. I hadn't thought of making them larger. Making the bananas themselves huge could work, because I suppose it is about sort of often these things that are kind of larger than you, power structures being a thing that is sort of oppressive because they have more power and a sort of a larger amount of control than an individual citizen does. So I guess for those reasons it could work, but so far I haven't tried to make any bananas really huge. I think it would make how you came across them different as well, and I think one of the things that I was sort of talking to you about yesterday was I quite like the idea that you can stumble across something and it's just in and amongst the rest of the things in life. And I think once it becomes really, really huge, it is sort of less of a feeling of discovery. You're not discovering a detail as much, but that's not to preclude ever doing that.
Is it just, sorry, just to follow up on that, would you feel uncomfortable, or would you be prepared to, because you mentioned the banana coming, the idea kind of coming from the tabloids, so say the Daily Mail, I don't know if everyone's aware of the Daily Mail, but would you be prepared to drop a huge banana on the head office of the Daily Mail or the Houses of Parliament, or, you know, is that the kind of provocation you would, how far would you go?
Metaphorically drop or physically drop?
Physically drop.
Yeah, go for it. I definitely like the idea of trying to infiltrate more actual power structures. But I think the way that I work often ends up with thinking that, or starting out with this plan to do something that critiques a power structure that's in place through doing something subversive and an action and kind of getting somewhere where it shouldn't be. And then the work actually becomes more about the difficulty with doing that. So a work I once did in the past, it's kind of unrelated to the bananas but fits to that point, is something where I decided as an artwork I would take revenge on some people who chopped down my favourite woods as a child, and they were bluebell woods. So I decided I would do this action where I would find the logging company that did it, and plant and have bluebells inside all of their logging machinery. And I thought that would be a nice thing to do. But through the process of trying to do this artwork, which I was sort of trying to research who could have possibly not logged the woods, and how I would get access to their machinery and all of that, it ended up with a situation where I realised it was actually impossible for me to find out that information no matter how hard I tried. So I ended up organising a meeting with a logging company who worked locally, and organising a photo shoot with them, because there was no way I could get into their machinery without their permission as well. Like, I couldn't break into it physically, even though I knew where it was. So it sort of ended up being, and what I ended up doing was sort of photographing these things, but photographing using partly staged photographs that had photoshopped elements to kind of look into how impossible it actually was for me to enact this revenge that I said I was going to do. And Instead, it was about the inability to do that, and kind of how I showed doing that instead. So I don't know if I ended up trying to destroy the Daily Mail headquarters with giant bananas, might end up with a slightly different outcome, but that in itself could kind of be interesting about how much control we have over things, even if we have a problem with them, and even if large numbers of the population have a problem with them.
Someone else?
Just as a response to what you just said, I think it would be lovely to have a squashed banana on like all the Daily Mail kind of like headlines. It would be really nice, I think.
I thought you could actually infiltrate the Daily Mail headquarters just with banana skins outside doors, and then you'd make them all look silly because they'd fall over.
Okay, so if there are no more questions, maybe we close this first feedback session. So thank you all very much for being here and sharing your thoughts, your time, and your presence with all of us. And I would like to invite you to tomorrow's and the next days and every day's feedback session to go on sharing your thoughts with the rest of the performance. And remind you that tomorrow, after the feedback session with the shows we're gonna see this evening, we'll have a discussion with David Micklem about the topic of this year's visual artist, all the visual artists work here, which is borders. So tomorrow we won't have a concrete visual artist, but
it's visual artists and performing artists. I think borders, how we address as an artist the theme of borders. That is the theme of this year's festival. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Sí.